Bring it a bit closer, Chair.
How's that? Yep. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. I'm Martin Warnes, representing Beer Church, and I will be chairing the meeting tonight. To begin the meeting, there are a few matters of housekeeping. Action in the event of emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runwald Street. This meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube page and will be available after the meeting. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, and would participants please mute the microphones when not speaking. Introductions. Members of the committee will introduce themselves, and if you are substituting for someone, will you please flag that up? So starting from my left.
Councillor McSpindler, Shrub End Ward, subbing for Councillor Sam McCarthy.
Councillor Mark Gocher, Castle Ward.
Councillor Sue Lissymore, Prettygate Ward, subbing for Councillor Roger Mannion.
Councillor Lee Tate for Prettygate Ward.
Councillor Mike Lilly, substituting for Councillor Sam McLean. So many Mcs here. That's it.
Julie Young, subbing for Kayla Rippingale, Granster Ward.
Catherine Spindler, Saints. Councillor Tracy Arnold, Stanway Ward.
Councillor Carl Powling, Mersing Pye, Fleet Ward, subbing for Robert Davison.
Jackie McLean, Marksdown Lair Ward.
Benji Firth, Urban Design Officer.
James Ryan, Planning Manager, South Team.
Irene Gimorgi, Historic Buildings and Areas Officer.
Nadine Calder, Principal Planning Officer.
Simon Cairns, Joint Head of Planning.
Karen Sirett, Joint Head of Planning.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Officer. And just to point out, Chair, and to members and knowledge outside, is that the Monitoring Officer, Andrew Weavers, is joining us online tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly. Set them to silent and do not use voice or camera flash functions. We will have a break at 7:30 p.m. and if necessary every 90 minutes afterwards. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop is in this room. Whilst determination of a planning application is not a quasi-judicial process, unlike certain licensing functions carried out by the local authority, it is a formal administrative process involving the application of national and local policies, reference to legislation and case law, as well as rules of procedure, rights of appeal, and an expectation that people will act reasonably and fairly. All those involved in these decisions should remember that the possibility that an aggrieved party may seek a judicial review and or complain to the Ombudsman on grounds of maladministration or breach of the authority's code. So, apologies have been received by Councillor McLean, Councillor Rippingale, Councillor Mannion, Councillor Davison, Councillor McCarthy, and substitutions have been notified as we've gone round the room as councillors have introduced themselves. So we move on to item 3, declarations of interest. Councillors must publicly announce the item, the number, and whether the interest is disclosable, pecuniary, or any other registrable or non-registrable interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Gocher.
Yes, I'd like to declare that I will be stepping off the committee for item 7.2 Albert Road and item 7.3 Trinity Church. That is because I've expressed opinions in public on those two items as a ward councillor, and it could potentially open the committee up to charges of predetermination if I remain on the committee and vote on those two items. So I'll be stepping off for those and confining any comments as ward councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Grocer. Councillor Lilly.
Yes, Chair. I have on item 7.2 Albert Street, I have a disclosable pecuniary interest as I'm a resident of Colchester Road, and I will step out of the room for that item.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Item 4, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Item 5, have your say. If anyone has a petition they wish to present to me on any of the items on the agenda this evening, please do so now. Move on to item 6. Minutes of the meeting of the 17th of October are before the committee for confirmation. Are there any points of accuracy? I can't see any, so can I have a proposer and a seconder for acceptance? Proposer, Councillor Arnold, seconder, Councillor Gocher. All those in favour?
That is carried, Chair.
Thank you. So we move on to planning applications. We have two in front of us this evening. Item 7.1, Arborough Development Site, Flagstaff Road, Colchester, which is the redevelopment to the site to provide 203 residential units, approximately 160 square metres of commercial floor space with associated access, public open space, landscaping, car and cycle parking and associated infrastructure. The recommendation is approval subject to Section 106 agreement. The presenting officer will be Nadine Calder. There are no public speakers for and no public speakers against and no councillors. Then we'll move on to item 7.2, which is land off of Albert Street East, Colchester. Application for the erection of 8 dwellings consisting of 4 times 3 bed houses and 4 times 2 bed apartments. And the recommendation is for approval to be presented by Daniel Bird, with Francis Wagstaff speaking against and no speakers for. And visiting councillors will be Councillor Mark Gocher and Councillor Kamal Kafoglu. And turning over the page, we have a third item, which is Trinity Square 7.3, short-term information posters, boards to display on the perimeter of the site boundary, which we wish to inform residents and businesses of the funded by UK government projects which are being developed. There's 4 A1 boards in total, 1 for each side of the railing, north, east, south and west facing. Recommended for approval. Presenting us for James Ryan and speaking against will be Melina Spantidaki.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come as well, that obviously we have item 8, which is the changes to the scheme of delegation, and to confirm we have had no requests to speak on that item from the public. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, on item 7.1, I wish to read out the following statement regarding the reasons of no additional speaking at this meeting, for the reasons as follows. At the meeting this evening, we will be considering Arborough Development Site, which I deferred for a risk report at the last meeting. The process for this type of deferral is outlined in the drop procedure in the Council's planning code and outlines the steps that must be followed. The Democratic Services Officer contacted me ahead of the meeting to seek my view on allowing speaking at the meeting, as the code does not definitively prohibit further contributions of speaking. After careful consideration, I have concluded that no further public speaking shall take place on this item for the following reasons. The deferral has in effect paused the decision of the item from the last meeting, and we will be resuming the debate on the proposal from Councillor Davison following presentation of the risk report. There was an extended session of public speaking at the meeting on the 17th of October, where I allowed additional speakers on the application. The precedent of previous deferrals for risk reports has been that no public speaking has taken place. For these reasons, I have decided that no additional speaking shall take place. So, I will read out the procedure that that summarises the process that we will follow this evening. So, following on from my decision to defer the item for a risk report on the 17th of October 2024, officers have undertaken a risk report which concludes with a suggested reason for refusal, which comprises of reasons based upon policies SP7 and DM17, which formed part of the original proposal from Councillor Davidson. You can find this on page 22 of the report. The Planning Procedure Code of Practice details that councillors can modify the motion should they wish to amend their reasons, and this would ordinarily be done with the proposer. However, as Councillor Davison is not here at the meeting, he cannot alter his proposal from the previous meeting. You can find this on page 33 of the report. I have received advice from officers that this motion has been properly put to the committee and must be dealt with before any other proposal can be made. So to be clear, we will have a debate on the risk report and Councillor Davidson's motion, and we will then vote on Councillor Davison's unamended proposal. If members wish to support alternative proposals, including the suggested reasons for refusal as provided by officers, approval of the application or deferral, then members will need to consider carefully how they vote on that proposal. And should it fail, I will invite new proposals after that vote, should it not be approved. Thank you. So before we proceed to the debate, I'd like to ask councillors who were not in attendance at the previous meeting, that's those that are substituting, to confirm they have seen the previous debate and that they are cognizant of the issues surrounding the application. So can I ask Councillor Julie Young first?
Yeah, I'm not sure quite how much you need, Chairman, in respect of this, but when I was asked to sub, I willingly said I would, and then having discovered yesterday I'd got the joy of 4 hours of listening to the previous planning committee, I got myself up at 5:30 this morning and spent at least 4 hours in my bedroom with listening to the debate that took place. But I thought it was a good debate, and I do feel well prepared actually, because and I'll come to why I feel well prepared later on in the debate, but I have read the report thoroughly and prepared today for this meeting, as you would expect me to.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Tate.
I'll keep it brief. Yes, I have.
Thank you, Councillor Tate. Councillor Lissimore.
I do the same. Yes, I have, and yes, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lissimore. And Councillor Spindler.
Yes, I was a member of the audience.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Nadine Calder and ask her to present the risk report. Nadine.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. As you've just heard, there is a suggested reason for refusal put forward by Councillor Davidson, which centred around, firstly, the under-provision of affordable housing, and secondly, the adverse impact on heritage assets, and in particular the Roman Circus Shell ancient monument. A report has been prepared by your officers on the risks associated with the proposal from the committee and any potential impacts it will bring. In summary, The report advises that policy SP4 is a strategic policy which sets out a total minimum housing requirement for the planned period for the city, but does not apply specific development proposals, and it does not specify a percentage of affordable housing other than for the garden community. And therefore, members are advised that there will be a high risk of costs awarded against the council at appeal if a reason for refusal based on policy SP4 were pursued. Policy DM8, whilst aiming to secure 30% affordable housing provision in new major developments, accepts that there are exceptional circumstances where alternative affordable housing provision may be accepted. And for the reasons set out in the report and discussed at length at the last meeting, your officers feel that these exceptional circumstances are met and that therefore there is no direct conflict with policy DM8. As a result, again, your officers feel that there is a high risk of costs being awarded against the council at appeal if a reason for refusal based on a conflict with policy DM8 were to be pursued. Concerns with regards to the proposal's impact on the scheduled ancient monument, the Roman Circus, officers have advised that the proposed development would ensure the full preservation, enhancement and better preservation of that part of the Roman Circus which lies within the application site and therefore in the ownership of the applicant, which represents a public benefit. Therefore, a reason for refusal based on an adverse impact on the scheduled monument and associated archaeology is considered to bring with it a risk of costs being awarded against the council. There have been some small changes and additional plans provided since the last meeting, which I will show you now. This plan here aims to show you the ownership plan of the Roman Circus. So the Roman Circus is shaded in pink, and as you can see, the application site is outlined in red, so it's actually a very small part of the application site and the circus that overlap, which means that is part of the application site within the ownership of the applicant. You can also see the different colour parcels. The Roman Circus is actually split into 9 separate parcels under 5 different land ownerships, which just makes it difficult to provide a whole scheme, because only a small part of it is within the ownership of the applicant, and that's the only part we can consider as part of this application. This plan has also been submitted, which is an alteration to the submitted landscaping scheme, which shows the proposed layout of the site, but also in red are the existing buildings which will be demolished as part of the proposal. And as you can see, a large part of where the circus would have been is covered by buildings. So by demolishing these buildings and providing that preservation in terms of the path and using the remaining of the land as open space and laying it to grass would reveal the significance of the Roman Circus, and that's the public benefit that we're talking about, because it's currently hidden, so there's no benefit at the moment. You can't see it, it's not there. Where this proposal were to succeed and these buildings would be demolished, you can then start to appreciate the Roman Circus. There have been some discussions about how to better present or to appreciate the Roman Circus in terms of the built form that fronts the Roman Circus, and the applicant has been in discussion with a local architect who spoke on the application last time and has put forward schemes which have been met with some support from members, and after quite a few changes the applicant has provided a revised design for those blocks that front the Roman Circus, which can be seen here. The changes are external only. They don't change the footprint or the height or any parameters of the building which we would consider to be material. So it is just a change in materials and the external design, which has been met with support by the architect and is put forward before members if you wish to, if you were to go down a favourable recommendation. And to show you the difference, this was previously proposed. So if members were inclined to approve the application, the current scheme is the revised one. We do have a fallback of the approved one, though, of the previously submitted scheme. So the recommendation remains one for approval. However, notwithstanding the advice provided by your officers and the comments received by relevant consultees, should members wish to pursue a reason for refusal based on harm being caused to the heritage assets as a result of the proposal's layout and design, with the public benefits not outweighing this identified harm, then this may be evidenced at appeal, albeit through a consultant, as your officers and consultees will be professionally conflicted. With a subsequent appeal, whilst a subsequent appeal might be allowed, the potential exposure to an award of costs might be reduced. A reason for refusal has therefore been suggested in the report. And if you do have any questions on the report, please do let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. I think it would be helpful to the committee if you were to go to the relevant part of the report and to read out what the reasons for a refusal would be, just so it's plain for both committee members and other people watching this meeting.
So should I read the whole suggested reason for refusal?
Yes, please. Thank
Okay. So if members were to find harm with the historic environment in the area, then the suggested reason for refusal would be as follows. The development of this prominent site within the Garrison Conservation Area in the detailed manner proposed would serve to erode the cohesive character and appearance of the site by reason of the domestic, suburban-inspired scale and character of the development and the associated loss of former military buildings and historic layout of the cavalry barracks, which together contribute positively to the significance of the conservation area designation. The harm identified is less than substantial, but nevertheless could be avoided in the opinion of the local planning authority through the use of an enhanced contextually responsive design. The submitted proposals are considered to lack distinctive contextual design references to the barracks and fail to reinforce the historic grain and hierarchy of spaces and built forms found within the existing site. The scheme accordingly fails to make a positive contribution to the local character and distinctiveness. The harm and consequential loss of significance therefore lacks clear and convincing justification, and the less than substantial harm identified is not outweighed by the public benefits which could be secured with more effective design mitigation. The development is consequently contrary to Colchester Local Plan Section 1 Policy SP7, which, amongst other things, seeks to ensure that development proposals respond positively to local character and context, to preserve and enhance the quality of existing places and their environs, provide buildings that exhibit individual architectural quality within well-considered public and private realms, and protects and enhances assets of historical or natural value, together with Section 2 Policy DM16, which requires that, in cases where less than substantial harm is identified, this harm is weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. The policy sets the objective that development affecting the historic environment should seek to conserve and enhance the heritage assets in all cases, there is the expectation that any new development will enhance the historic environment or better reveal the significance of the heritage asset. For these reasons, the local planning authority considers that the proposed development results in unjustified harm to the significance of the conservation area and fails to respond positively to local character to better reveal the significance of the Garrison Conservation Area contrary to relevant national guidance and local policies. The harm identified is avoidable and not outweighed by the public benefits identified, contrary to the provisions of policies SP7 and DM16 as set out above.
Thank you. Just one point I wanted to pick up on the amendment sheet. Did you explain the Roman Circus transfer of land, which involves a managing agent, and did you explain the affordable housing?
No, apologies, I missed that. So again, since the last meeting, the applicant has suggested that in addition to the two options that have been put forward to the committee in terms of affordable housing provision, there would be a third option, which would be for a commuted sum being provided for off-site affordable housing provision. So that would mean that instead of affordable housing on site, the council would receive a sum of money which could then provide affordable housing off-site. So that is a third option that member may wish to consider. The Roman Circus open space area, which I've shown, which was the area shade that overlapped the pink shaded area of the Roman Circus, is proposed to be transferred to the council. So the council would own that piece of land, but a maintenance company would maintain the site, as long as the council wishes to do that. So that is an option that is suggested by the applicant. And then the applicant also confirmed that they will be carrying out improvement works to the visitor centre, as has been suggested in Section 106 agreement in the previous report. So those were the clarifications on the amendment sheet. Apologies for missing them.
No, that's fine. So, Councillor Lissamore, yeah.
Sorry, apologies. I just wanted a point of clarification. I presume that the amount of money that they would give for the affordable housing is commercially sensitive, hence why it's not being quoted. If it's not, then what is it? Are you happy with the amount of money that they are offering? And apologies if I've missed that. I'm in the documentation.
It does say it on the amendment sheet, so we do have the figures for that.
Okay, thank you. Now, in a moment, I will open up to members to ask questions, to discuss and debate the proposal and the risk report only. Okay, so we have frozen the discussion. We are now discussing the risk report. If you could attract the attention of my vice chair, he will let me know he wants to speak, and I propose, as of last time, not to let someone speak for the second time until everyone has had a chance to speak for the first time. Bear in mind, when we begin to discuss the report, I froze the debate at the proposal. The developer has come back and made some amendments. So obviously they have not been consulted upon, so you need to be aware of that, okay? Right, who's first? Councillor Lilly.
Thank you, Chair. There's quite a few issues here, and you want to separate the two, but on the question of the deferral, and that's the reason why we come back here, and I'm quite happy with the reasons that we refused the application for those reasons anyway, and are happy that there could be costs recorded against us if there ever went to an appeal. So I'm happy to propose that we accept those reasons for a refusal and go along with that. But having said that, a couple of days ago, we had an amendment sheet with a brand new design sent to us, which is different to what we had previously and is a better one. And we'll be asked to look at that tonight. But I'm not happy that it's come to committee without actually going over consultation to the people out there, the experts, the civic society, the archaeological people, all those on the list of consultees. They should be asked to consult or to comment on that new plan on the amendment sheet and the plans forward. And then once we've got those comments on board, they'll come back to committee and we can have a look at it and see if everybody's in agreement or disagreement. It's far better doing that now than us making the decision without actually consulting the public. It makes sense. And on the third item they're not happy with is the action management company. We're all councillors, we all have to deal with management companies in our areas, and it's like banging your head against the wall and getting them to actually do anything, apart from CPH, of course, who are good, marvellous, but the rest of them we are constantly chasing up broken fences, overgrown grass, everything you name it, and to hand over the site of a major archaeological site, it fills me or it terrifies me, because I don't believe they'll cut the grass, to be honest. Management companies are something that was invented. I wish I had some money years ago and invested one. I'll be a millionaire by now, along with Del Boy and the rest of them. So I'm not happy with that. I think that the council should own this site. They should maintain this site, and so that it remains in council's powers of anything else that comes up in the future, and that ward councillors and the trust are not chasing the management company just to cut the grass of the site. So there's three items there. So I'm happy to propose that we accept the reasons for refusal. I'm happy to propose that we defer the amendment design application so it goes to the public for consultees and it comes back to committee, and that we actually forget the idea of a management company and let the council take over control of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. What we'll do is we will continue with the debate on the deferral report, and then we'll come back to your proposal. Okay. So next is Councillor Gocher.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that last point, in terms of procedure, which is something I've been struggling with, if, let's say, we voted tonight to refuse the application on the basis of Councillor Davidson's original proposals, or on other criteria as set out at the end of the risk report, would the applicant then be able to submit a new application completely with the new design on as been amended? Would that happen, or what would follow a refusal tonight? That's the first question.
Okay, would you like me to get an answer to the first question?
Yeah,
before you put the next points. Simon or Karen or Nadine, can you answer that point?
The most likely next step is going to be an appeal by the developer. They have the right to test their scheme with the planning inspector. I think that it's more likely that they would appeal than submit a new planning application. So the next likely step is an appeal, and then there's different scenarios depending on the outcome of the appeal.
Okay, Councillor Gocher, carry on.
Thank you. I share Councillor Lilly's concern about the maintenance, in the sense that we've all probably got cases in our wards of areas that are maintained by management companies where the work isn't done. And I think in terms, this is an issue, I suppose, for the wider council, but there is something special about this area, as we all know, with its historical significance. So the idea of not taking the maintenance on board as a council for such a historically important area doesn't sit well with me at all. In terms of wider questions, can you maybe explain to me, maybe officers explain to me again why the concern over the safe route between the two parts of the school being impacted by the one entrance to the new development on Flagstaff Road, and the fact that there will be more traffic, why that can't be or why in your view that can't be included as a reason for objecting. I know it was discussed in the last meeting, but it would be good to have that addressed again, because it does seem to me that it would impact on those kids walking from one part of the school to the other one, which is further down the circular road. So there's that issue I'd like to raise again.
Yeah, just before we go on to the third, can I just remind members that we are discussing the risk report, so the issues we bring up need to relate to the risk report, because you've just brought something up that isn't in the risk report, although I respect your reasons for, and I will obtain an answer for it, okay?
Yeah, thank you. That's fine. In terms of the suggested reason for refusal that it's at the end of the risk report, it is based on the design of the development buildings. In your view, is that a more robust reason for refusal that is less likely to produce an appeal or a successful appeal than the initial reasons for refusal? And if so, what is it about it that makes it more robust? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take one more speaker before I go back to the officers for answers. So, Councillor Tate.
Thank you. I'm a little, well, I'm not puzzled. I'm puzzled about something else. I'll come to that. I don't feel that the amendments that have been sent in are reflective of meeting the concerns of the conversation debate that was held last time. So I'm not convinced by them to start with. I just want to clarify. So in the report, it states that their calculations meant that including the affordable housing, their scheme was unviable by £0.95 million. And they're suggesting that to give the area some affordable housing, which I'm all for, by the way, they will either contribute 2.3 million or 3.1 million, dependent on which option we were to take. So 2.3 million or 3.1 million is considerably larger than the 0.95 million that they're saying is unviable. And I just can't get my head around the basic maths of that. If they can afford to give if the developer can afford to give £3 million for us to build something elsewhere, why can't that 3.1 million be invested in this to make this viable? And that's come from the amendment sheet, so I hope that is okay.
Okay, anything else you wish to raise? Okay, can I ask the officers to come back on those 8 points?
Thank you. So the changes that have been made they affect three blocks. I counted them, there's 33 blocks on that site. 3 blocks are proposed to be amended externally, not in terms of their footprint or height or anything else, it's just the materials and the appearance. It equates to 9% of the site being amended. In our opinion, that's not material. It's not a change that we would have potentially reconsulted on outside of this process. So in our view, it's not that significant to warrant a reconsultation, but we have discussed that if members were to be minded to approve this application on the basis of these changes being submitted, you could choose to delegate powers to the joint head of planning, and a reconsultation of those consultees could be undertaken. And if no material objection to that point, so to that point only the external appearance of those 3 blocks were received, then we could proceed on that basis. The management company and the owning that site, I think I've touched on that last time. The council is trying to move away from adopting open space that comes forward as part of new developments because there is no resource to maintain them in the long term. We haven't got the financial means to maintain them in the long term. If an open space is transferred to the council, we get an initial commuted sum towards that, but that money will run out at some point. But the space has to be maintained in the long term. So in this instance, the council is given ownership, and someone else would maintain it on our behalf. That's a win-win, and it's only that part of it's only the Roman Circus. We're not talking about the entire site, so we will not be involved with fences and things like that. It's the open space on the Roman Circus that is proposed to be given to the council. There is a condition proposed on the in the committee report, and that will be a landscape management plan. So there will be parameters in that landscape management plan that the developer will have to meet to the satisfaction of the council. So there is some control over that. In terms of the school, you members would have heard last time that the Highway Authority considers that the current proposal would be safer than what exists at the moment. The entrance to the site includes a pedestrian priority and cycle priority from Flagstaff Road. You also need to bear in mind that the current use of the site is industrial, and large HGVs could come and go unrestricted. So to have a residential use in a controlled manner is considered to be safer, and that's why we would not suggest going down the route of a refusal on that basis. The reason for refusal that was put before you is your officers still consider that the application is acceptable, but in order to avoid a potential risk at an appeal, the reason for refusal that has been put forward is based on the impact of the development on the site, which is a former military use. And whilst we think the proposal is acceptable, members may wish to conclude that it doesn't fully represent the former use, and that with changes made, it could be better. So, as set out in the report, we can't guarantee that this will not be upheld at appeal, but we think that going forward with the suggested reason for refusal, the risks to the council in terms of losing the appeal and being awarded costs against is reduced. And the figure you mentioned, Councillor Tate, 3.1, is actually of option 2 of the 2 options that have been put forward. Option 2 includes reducing Section 106 money towards other facilities, so communities, transport and sustainability. So we've taken money away from other places where we would have put money towards, and secured more housing, more affordable housing. So that money isn't coming from somewhere else. That money is still all the same money. It has been redistributed. So that's where the 3.1 million comes from. And the reason why they will be able to make an offsite contribution is because if you have no on-site affordable housing, you will get better sales. You will be able to sell more houses. So there isn't any new money coming in. It's just a redistribution of the money.
Sorry, just to add, I did actually say those
Can you come
two
through the
quotes.
chair, please?
I'm
Thank you.
sorry.
Can you ask to speak?
Can I speak, please?
You can, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I did actually say 2.3 million or 3.1 of the 2 options. So just for the purposes of everyone, really, please could you explain the 2.3 million as well?
I think if I can help with this, I think there was some concern also, Councillor Tate, about 0.9 in the original viability appraisal, wasn't there? So I think there was some confusion perhaps last time around about how viability appraisals are worked out and the issue of land value. So this is my attempt at trying to put it in a straightforward way. So viability appraisals use a set of predetermined inputs, and they are now standardised and have been for 4 or 5 years, maybe a bit longer. Land value is one of those inputs, and it's based on what is called a benchmark land value, and that is the existing use of the land plus a premium to the landowner. In other words, what the landowner would sell for, and it actually says a rational landowner. So in this case, the existing use value was a commercial use, commercial workshops. So there will be a value attached to that, and the evidence for that is sourced from a range of sources, land registry records, estate agent websites, property auction results. So that figure is predetermined, and it's normally agreed with anyone carrying out an evaluation of an appraisal. So this approach, I should say, does result from case law, so it's got a legal background to it. So in terms of a viability appraisal, it doesn't matter if the owner of the site has always owned the land, so i.e. hasn't paid anything out, they've paid £100 to buy the site, or they've paid £1 million. The site value will depend on what the market says is the value for that area of land based on its use plus that premium. So in this instance, the benchmark land value was agreed by the consultants we appointed to evaluate the appraisal put forward by the applicants. So having said all that, all the standard inputs have gone into assess the viability of this site, and you're right, it came out with 0.9 million, I think it was, that you said, and is correct. That includes a standardised figure for development return or profit, and that is 15 to 20%. So the affordable housing, which has come out of has been put forward by the applicants, will affect that bottom line. So it's come out of that profit value or one of the other standardised inputs into the viability appraisal. So that's why initially there was, I think, 10 affordable housing units on site put forward. What the applicants are now saying is if they didn't build them on site, they could provide 2.3 million. The other alternative was 15 units, and that equates to a larger commuted sum to spend on affordable housing off-site. Does that help everyone?
Thank you. So if I understand and extrapolate what both Nadina says and you've said, they're able to provide more money for off-site housing because they'll raise more money than the housing on-site because there'll be no affordable housing. Am I correct in thinking that? Thank you. I'll call the other speakers wishing to speak. I just wish to make a contribution myself. In relation to the management company, I worked in social housing for most of my career, 15 years doing frontline housing management, and have dealt with a number of situations that require private contractors to carry out work. And delegating to a private management company wouldn't necessarily, in my mind, be a win-win situation, because you would have to spend money on monitoring the work that was done, and given the importance of this site, you would want that to be a higher frequency. And in my own experience, when a contract becomes unviable for a private contractor, it's not unheard of them walking away from the contract, and therefore you have to then re-tender for the contract. You have to manage the standard of work whilst they're working out their notice period, because they have no motivation at that point because they've given their notice. And my feeling is that given the importance of this site, why wouldn't you want the council to control as much of that as you can, even if in the long run it does incur costs, because this is a heritage asset. So that would be my opinion on that one. On the opinion as which I think you were saying, that in terms of reasons for refusal, whether what's before you is respecting in design terms the nature of the garrison. This site, to my understanding, comes wholly under the garrison conservation area. And if you look at the site, which is the other side of Flagstaff Road, it has a more military look to it, in the sense that some of the development is more, to put it in sort of colloquial terms, more sort of blockified. And what you're looking at in front of you, in my view, is closer to the housing, which is the other side, sort of Walsingham Road heading down into the town, more than the other side of Flagstaff Road, which reflects the military nature. So the question I would be asking is, does the design reflect the nature and the history of the garrison within this garrison conservation area? And if it doesn't, should it have more of a military feel about it, more blocks, rather than, you know, the suburban nature that you see on the design? So that's a thought that I've got, and you may want to hold that within your mind. So we move on to Councillor Young.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the weight of this decision bears very heavy on us all, and I think for me, this is about, I remember what Robert Davidson said at the last committee meeting and talked about doing better, and I think there's significant concerns around the table around whether this is the best that we can get. How we can get to something better is, I suppose, my question really. I hear what officers have said in terms of our likely success rate if the applicant went to appeal on the 2 reasons proposed for refusal, and the holes in that argument that could be deployed by any applicant that went to appeal. So I'm anxious about that personally. I'm grateful to officers to articulate some alternative grounds that could be utilised in terms of a refusal of this application. But I think the other option, Mr. Chairman, is another deferral to see what more work could be done with the applicant to better this proposal. I'm pleased to see that there has been some movement since the last time the committee were together. I cast my mind, I listened to the debate that was had last time, and Councillor Dundas in particular was talking about the aspirations of this council buying the site back in 2021. That took me back to 2020 in thinking about when I was portfolio holder and was having regular meetings with Colchester Archaeological Trust. The aspiration certainly I had in mind about the visitor centre. I don't think we're being ambitious enough about that in terms of, you know, improving the toilet facilities, for example, I think we could be much more ambitious about creating something really special there. At that time, I know that despite our aspirations for that site, our understanding about the historical significance of that Roman remain, it presented quite a poor visitor attraction. So remember Claire Taylor at the time, our tourism manager, would say visitors would go up to the Roman circus site and be disappointed with what they saw. So I think the new committee that has, I understand, been brought together with Colchester Archaeological Trust, in English Heritage and other interested parties really could drive something really special forward to make sure we have a visitor attraction that is fit for the time being that we are in, and it isn't just a tatty hut with an additional toilet, frankly, because that's what we've got, and that's what I don't want to see. So, Mr. Chairman, you know, I'm subbing here tonight. I'm thinking about the past. I'm thinking about Alistair Day. I think it was his most significant and last piece of work he did for this authority. Sadly lost his life far too early. But I think, you know, in listening to the debate last time, I remember at the time, going back to 2020, we were excited by the fact that this development would remove that building that sits over the top of the Roman circus. And I was really pleased to see on the screen tonight, it graphically demonstrated so people can actually see what we're talking about. Because I think there was a lot of confusion at the last meeting about talking about this historic site, and actually by going ahead with the development there, it does remove that building, which is what the development brief actually articulated. So I think there's a balanced argument to be made here. We can do better if we could defer it to do better, and to make sure we can hold the feet to the fire, frankly, over this development company, the management company. I mean, I'm sure I could probably take you to a site today where a management company is left to cut the grass and they just don't do it. And you've got foot-long grass. Well, we don't want that for this site. So we need to be absolutely specific in our requirement of a management company about what we want that management company to do and make sure that's enforceable. So I'm interested to hear the views of other people, but, you know, I'm wavering myself about which way is the best way to go forward to get the best outcome. We do not want to expose the council to costs. We don't want to do that. We need to be very mindful about how we proceed further with this.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Next we have Councillor Powling.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Young. I think it can certainly be done a lot better. But I think as a committee and for the City of Colchester, we're missing a big thing here. This is the only Roman circus in Northern Europe. It is unique to the UK, it's unique to Colchester. And we're going to develop around it? I think we should be pushing, like Councillor Young said, maybe the Roman circus should be semi-rebuilt. We really should be looking at our policy SP7 and DM16, which we would be breaching, I believe, if the application went forward. But policy DM18, tourism, if the Roman circus was possibly partly rebuilt in sections where we can, the tourism and money that would be brought into Colchester, we have got a Norman castle. The old...
can I just remind that we are discussing...
No, obviously, but basically, yeah, within the report, with the...
Can we stay closely to that, please?
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry. I was just saying, I think, looking at it on the reasons of SP7, which the officer's referring to on there, should be really looked at. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lissimore.
Thank you. I realise I'm very late to this show, and however, I am the county councillor for this area, and I just want to make a point in that I have not been invited to any meetings. I have not been included in any reports. Now, I'm big enough and ugly enough to invite myself to events, but if you don't know they're happening, you can't invite yourself. So I just want to make that point right from the start. I would like to ask one direct question. If we defer it again, are we putting ourselves at risk of appeal because we're taking too long to make a decision? I too am extremely concerned about a management company. I too have areas within my ward and my division where management companies do not do what they have promised, do not do what is written into a contract, and we end up with an absolute mess. I would like to know if if English Heritage have been consulted on a management plan, and a management committee rather, and if we do go down that route, and I was if we do, that we absolute write in stone who is part of that management company, and that is the local, both city councillors, county councillors, English Heritage, Colchester Civic Society, all those people that really deeply care for that area and ensure that the funding is there for as many years as we can possibly get to make sure that's set in stone. But that's only if that goes ahead. We can do so much better than this. We all know that. Everyone going through the 4 hours of discussions at the last meeting, every single person has said we can do so much better than this. But as I say, I'd like to know how you feel about the risk of appeal at present and possible involvement of English Heritage.
Thank you. So we have 7 points. If the officers could address them. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with the management company. That seems to be a big sticking point. The offer to pass it on to the council and maintain it is an offer. What we normally do is there's a Section 106 agreement signed by all parties, and as part of that agreement there is the opportunity for the council at some point to say we would like to take that land on, that open space. Now, for the reasons I've set out before, the council tends to not take on open space because we haven't got the financial means to maintain them for a long period. However, if members were minded to approve this application, but the only matter that stops you from doing this is the management company, then there is a way around that, and the council could take it on. I would advise that's not what I would advise you to do, because at the moment we haven't got that money to maintain it in the long term. But if that's the only sticking point, it's only an option. It's not something that has to be done. If you don't want to own that site but not maintain it, then there will be ways around that. I don't think at this moment I should go into alternative options for refusal, because we have set out what we believe the alternative, the safest way for the council to be exposed to the least amount of risk is, and that's the reason for refusal that is set out in the report. The visitor centre there's going to be a financial contribution, and well, no, the applicant would carry out the works, and at the moment, the desire from the governors of the visitor centre, they would like to modernise the building. They are the ones who put forward that they would like to have accessible toilets, but in addition to accessible toilets, what would happen is this would form part of an extension. The extension is to the northern part of the building, which faces fronts the development. So what will in effect happen is the appearance of the visitor centre will change, because when viewed from the development, where there's going to be public footpaths or just footways, there's going to be connectivity through it, it looks more inviting from that area. and that's where they're hoping to invite people in. So it's not just toilets; it's more than toilets. It's just that's how it has been explained what they would like to have done, and that's because I think the toilets are upstairs, they're not accessible. That's their first point that they would like to do, but it's just a ground floor extension with an entrance more than anything. So, and again, the reason why the applicant is doing this is because they need to mitigate their own impact. We can't ask for too much, so we can't be over ambitious because there's a limit to what can be done, and we believe what has been put forward will be able to be done in a nice way. It was mentioned that we can do better if deferred. I would like to just remind members that it's the applicant who has put forward this scheme. It depends on what you would like to defer it on, but if you would like to defer it on redesigning the scheme, then I believe that is procedurally not possible. But also the applicant does not have to do that. If you were to defer it and you would like to have a complete redesign or just change the layout, the houses, then the applicant has got a right to come back and say, no, we will not do that. We will take the application back to committee with no changes and you will have to discuss it then. So we do need to make a decision at some point. There is at the moment not a real risk of a deferral apart from simply delaying a decision. There is the statutory time limit for an appeal against non-determination has lapsed at the moment. So we believe there's no risk of an appeal at the moment if no decision is made. But for the reasons I've just explained, we do need to make a decision at some point. And if we keep going back to ask for changes that the applicant may not be willing to do because they don't have to, then we are simply just wasting resources. And yeah, I think I've touched on the management company. I feel that there is a condition that would set out the parameters for that. There is the potential to involve certain bodies in that management plan, but as I've said, if that is a sticking point, then if members would wish to take it on and not have a management company, then that would be an option.
Thank you, and I understand Simon wishes to contribute.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was just really going to build on the points that Nadine raised around the nature of the scheme as submitted and members' aspirations to achieve the best scheme possible. It really goes to the heart of the scheme insofar as we have a scheme before us, and the critical test for you to decide is, does this scheme achieve the statutory test or preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area, which the Chairman identified earlier. In this instance, obviously we're dealing with a Victorian heritage asset, but this is a modern development, and there is no law that requires new development to be wholly historicist in favour. Indeed, there are many instances where extremely modern buildings work well in the context, particularly of very ancient heritage assets, such as the circus, where any new buildings are clearly not in context with that particular asset. In terms of the visitor centre and it being insufficiently ambitious, as you've heard, there is no further viability. So, you know, one can't get blood out of a stone in terms of extracting further financial contributions for a more ambitious building. As Nadine has explained, the developer is willing to execute design works on the building, and they can procure much better value, I'm sure, than any of us could in achieving effectively a turnaround for that building to reface it onto the monument. So rather than it presenting its rump end to the circus, it would be turned around, would present a brand new and attractive entrance and modern facilities, which would be a significant improvement. We must remember this developer only has control over a small portion of the circus. I think Nadine showed you on the plan earlier this evening that the monument itself stretches across a whole number of ownerships where there are very special buildings that equally could not now be removed. So there is no prospect of delivering the circus in its virgin entirety, surrounded by a neo-Georgian lozenge of new build development. That simply is not achievable, and indeed the architect who originally came up with that concept has admitted that is not deliverable. So we really need to consider the scheme that is before us. And in terms of the presentation of the monument, Historic England have no objection to the way in which that is presented, which reflects the presentation at B1B to the east side across Flagstaff Road. So for that reason, the chairman identified, Councillor Gocher asked the question, what is the difference between this reason for refusal that is tabled in support of members and the previous reasons that were considered at the previous committee meeting? And in essence, that is that the reason for refusal is refocused in terms of the character of the new build development as a contribution to development, significant development within the conservation area, rather than focusing on its impact on the circus monument, which per se there is no objection from Historic England nor from your own archaeological advisor. So for that reason, the original conceptual reason for refusal was found to be, or felt to be, unsound, but a refocus of that reason for refusal around the character and appearance of the conservation area was considered to offer a greater prospect of success at appeal and a lesser exposure to potential costs. But I would like to reinforce to members, it is not really around costs. It is about the local planning authority's chance of success at appeal and the need for those reasons for refusal to be evidenced in the statutory consultee and other responses received. And we simply do not or cannot identify direct harm to the circus itself as something which could stand up on appeal for the reasons that Councillor Young identified in terms of the very significant enhancement that would be derived from the removal of the built form, which presently sits on top of it and obscures it in its totality on this site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, and just to clear up one point which Councillor Lissimore asked, this is my second time round as a councillor. Having been a county councillor first, I sympathise with not being invited to various planning, site meetings, etc. But if you could just clear up just what the legal rights are of a county councillor to be involved in planning meetings and visits.
Negotiations between the applicant and the local planning authority in terms of planning officers. There is no statutory duty for members to be involved in those discussions whatsoever. In this case, ward councillors were generally invited to relevant meetings with Historic England and Colchester Archaeological Trust on site. And obviously it was an oversight for county councillors not to be present at that, for which we apologise. And we will take note of that going forward. But in terms of statute, there is no statutory requirement. The requirement is obviously for those members to be involved in any democratic decision in due course.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, now, Councillor Lilly wanted to propose effectively the motion that Councillor Davison was going to make, but I'm going to cover that off because in a moment I will be putting Councillor Davison's motion to the committee, and you will be asked whether you want to approve it or whether you want to refuse it. And if the motion is approved, then the application will be refused for the reason in Councillor Davison's original decision. So I'm now going to ask that Rob reads out what that motion was for you once more, and then I will ask us to go to the vote.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the motion from Councillor Davidson from the 17th of October reads as follows. that the application be refused as the proposal did not accord with the local plan designation regarding affordable housing, policy DM8, as well as policies SP4, meeting housing needs, SP7, place shaping principles around the protection and enhancement of assets of historical value, and DM16, adverse impact on the important heritage assets. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And when I ask you to go to the vote, I ask you to hold in your minds the officer's report and the risks that they have highlighted to you associated with accepting this proposal and the alternatives put. Do you have an issue you want me to get answers for before we go to the vote, Councillor Lismore? Go ahead.
Yes, and my apologies for this at this late moment. I just want to clarify for those here and those perhaps that are listening and watching at home, and for us sitting here, we are refusing, we are being asked to vote on this refusal with only the reasons that Councillor Davison gave at that refusal. However, we do have a right, if this refusal is refused, that we then put in another refusal, including those reasons for refusal plus extra reasons for refusal.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your points. You need to get some clarity. I'll just ask Robert to come back.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just to be exactly clear, so as was the advice that we sought from the monitoring officer on this, is that Councillor Davidson's proposal has to be taken before we can get onto any other proposal at the meeting. Because as it was taken by the Chair, we then deferred for looking at that, and as Councillor Davidson is not here, we must take that before moving on. So as such, the Chair will ask members in a moment to go to that vote, and said if it is refused on those reasons, that is the end of the item. If it is, if members vote against the proposal, then we can look at other options such as approval, deferral, or this separate point of refusal that was suggested by officers, or at any point within those contexts. Is that clear?
Okay, so this is the moment. Okay, Councillor Davison's motion, as you've heard, bearing in mind the contents of the risk report that has been sent to you and has been discussed. Those in favour of Councillor Davison's motion, please show your hands.
3.
And those against Councillor Davison's motion.
6.
Thank you. So Councillor Davison's motion is lost.
Sorry, abstentions, Chair.
Sorry. Any abstentions? Sorry. No abstentions. So Councillor Davison's motion is lost.
Chair, I'm not sure if, sorry, to just go back, we don't have everyone who voted there. We've got 2 down. So can I just check?
Okay.
Can I check for yourself, Chair, because I don't believe you voted.
I didn't, and as far as I'm aware, I don't have to vote.
If that'll be counted as an abstention.
Right, okay, then count it as an abstention, please. Thank you.
And there's one other member, sorry, I didn't catch, who didn't vote.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, was it, I'm hearing, was it Councillor Spindler?
Yeah, Councillor Spindler said he approve, okay? Thank you.
No, Councillor Catherine Spindler, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Perhaps, to be clear, Chair, perhaps we'll just do it again to make sure so that we're not...
Because I'm getting confused here.
So we need to have a tally that adds up to
so
the number.
could I ask that everybody takes part? I will tell you beforehand, I'm abstaining as chair so I can maintain neutral, and then should there be a debate going forward, I'm in a more neutral position to be able to oversee that, okay? So those in favour of Councillor Davison's motion.
3.
Those against Councillor Davison's motion. No. Are you against it or for it?
7, and then the abstention would be yourself, Chair.
The abstention
Thank
is
you,
me.
that's cleared that up. So that motion is lost.
Right, that motion is lost. It's 7:20. I'm going to propose to you that we take a break. I know it's 10 minutes early, let's take a break. Do you give your normal?
Yeah, normal advice, members must not discuss the application during the break with other councillors or any other third party. Thank you, Chair.
And if we can be back in 15 minutes, please. Thank you. Right, thank you everybody. We've had our break and we'll now move back to the meeting. At this point, I will open it up to the floor and invite all alternative proposals, which could include approval, deferral or suggested reasons for referral, and further debate can take place. Now, before we do that, I've heard mentions of deferral, so I'm going to ask the clerk to read out what a deferral should be used for, so you understand the parameters within which a deferral can be proposed.
Thank you, Chair. So, a deferral of an application should not be used to redesign the scheme. A deferral should be used to request further information if that information is required for the committee to make a decision. It is inappropriate for a decision to be deferred if that issue can be conditioned or delegated for further consideration unless the committee need to have sight of this information before making a decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So as I've said, indicate if you want to speak, don't indicate to me, indicate to my Vice Chair, and then I will call in the order that my Vice Chair writes it down, and I'll give you all an opportunity to speak before we call people back in. So the first name I have is Councillor Powling.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to actually make the proposal that we refuse the application on the grounds of the officer's recommendations, SP7 and DM16.
Okay, anything else you wish to add?
No, as the officers have said that's the most robust way, I'd like to take on their recommendation, and that's the proposal to accept SP7 DM16 as the refusal.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Yeah,
Councillor Lissimore. Right, so what we'll do is we'll take Councillor Powling's motion and we will open it up for debate. So anybody wishes to speak on that, indicate to Mick, and he will tell me who to call. Councillor Tate.
I had indicated I was going to speak, however, my wish to speak was to do exactly what Carl's just done, so I withdraw it.
Thank you. And Councillor Gocher.
Thank you, Chair. Just on a point of clarification or advice from the officers, in your view, would it regarding Councillor Powling's proposal, would in your view that refusal be stronger if it simply has the reasons as outlined at the end of the risk assessment that you provide, rather than keeping point 1 of Councillor Davison's proposal with regard to the issue of affordable housing?
Officers, would you like to ask for further clarification and then explain, or would you just like to respond to that
Just to clarify, Chair, the officer suggested approach does not include affordable housing because, as is set out in the report, we've demonstrated there is no demonstrable viability to deliver such affordable housing, and therefore the terms of the relevant policy are complied with.
Are you happy with that response, Councillor Gocher?
Yes, I am, Chair. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else wishes to debate Councillor Powling's motion? Councillor Lismore.
Sorry, yes, I just wanted to add my thanks to Councillor Davidson for putting this refusal forward in the first place, but I do understand, well, I hope those listening and those here tonight understand why we had to refuse it. What he did was created a really good foundation which has now been worked on further, and I believe the proposal put forward by Councillor Powling encapsulates everything that's proposal and reinforces the refusal reasons. So that's why I'm in support of Councillor Powling's motion.
Thank you. I'm just conferring with the clerk, so there'll be a momentary silence and then I'll come back to you all. Okay, thank you. So we will move to the vote. I will ask the clerk to read out what it is you are voting. Oh, I see a hand come up. Councillor Young, is it something that contributes to what we're about to vote on?
Well, I don't know whether you could take alternative proposals at this stage or not.
I would suggest you vote down the proposal and then we can take an alternative, okay? Right, clerk, would you like to read out what it is that we are voting on?
Thank you, Chair. So to be clear, these are the suggested reasons for refusal that are on page 33 of the agenda in the risk report part of the report and under section 2.57. So there's no misunderstanding of which point we're discussing. I won't read them out as they are the reasons that Nadine has already read out, if that's okay, Chair. But if there is any understanding of that point now, please, members, make sure they indicate before we go to the vote.
Right, so everyone clear, or does anyone need more clarification? Okay, right. Those in favour of Councillor Powling's proposal, please show your hands.
Ten.
Those against Councillor Powling's proposal, please show your hands.
No.
Any abstentions?
1.
So that motion has passed, and if the clerk could just clarify what the committee has just done.
So the committee has just refused the application for the reasons as set out in 2.57 of the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everybody. And anyone who's turned up for that item, you are free to leave. And I'll give you space to do that before we move on to item 7.2.
Has to leave as well.
Yeah, I'll bring it back here. Right, thank you, everybody. And we move on to item 7.2, which is land east of Albert Street, Colchester. Recommendation is to approve. The presenting officer will be Daniel Bird. We will have Francis Wagstaff to speak against. Nobody speaking for, and visiting councillors will be Councillor Mark Gocher and Kamal Kafoglu. So, I note that Councillor, can we have some quiet, please? Thank you. I note that Councillor Gocher will recuse himself of this item as he's previously spoken as visiting councillor on this item, but will speak as a ward member. I note that Councillor Lilly has identified he has a disclosable pecuniary interest, cannot take part in the discussion or vote, and he has left the room. So I invite Daniel Bird to present the report to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for that, I was just sharing the document. This application is a deferred item for seeking planning permission for 8 units consisting of 4 3-bed dwellings and 4 2-bed apartments. The site is located to the south of Margaret Road, with the existing access being utilised and enhanced. The wider context of the site comprises of terraced dwellings to the west facing Albert Street, with detached properties to the east and southeast along Margaret Road and Corston Road. The prevailing character of dwellings within the vicinity feature rear gardens with limited off-street parking associated with the properties. The site is largely overgrown with some areas of high standing where historically some small buildings were located when the site was previously used as a builder's yard. Previous application 22-2460 was refused on the site for highway concerns identified by the Highway Authority. This application has revised the vehicular access arrangements and the Highway Authority now consider these issues to be overcome. Here is the existing site access. Here is the existing overgrown site. These are the elevations of the flats fronting Margaret Road. These are the floor plans for the flats. Here are the house elevations to the south of the site facing towards the parking area. This item was previously deferred to clarify issues. Apologies. This item was previously deferred to clarify issues such as land ownership and civil rights of way that adjacent properties have over the site. The applicant has provided a letter from their solicitor confirming that the previous owner on site had open access to the north and south toward Margaret Road and Colchester Road respectively. There have been a number of objection comments stating that neighbouring dwellings have civil rights of access through the folly, which is located east and south of the site. Whilst these comments are noted, such rights of access would be a civil matter to be resolved between the relevant parties rather than a planning matter. The applicant has completed ownership certificate A, which states that they have full ownership of all land within the red line boundary, and there is no evidence to suggest that this is not the case. Therefore, civil matters related to access would not constitute a reason for this application to be refused and would require the parties to resolve this matter outside of the planning process. At a previous committee, members requested further details of a management plan and management company to undertake the routine maintenance required of the amenity areas, including grass cutting, tree pruning and general site cleanliness. This has now been provided by the applicant and would become an approved document under condition 22. Finally, concerns were raised regarding the scale of the vehicle spaces and lack of disabled vehicle space. Both matters have been addressed through the revised site highways plan as seen on the screen. All spaces now meet adopted standards, with each unit being provided with a dedicated space, with an additional guest disabled space provided to the right-hand side, as you can see. It's considered that the issues raised at the previous committee have been addressed and the application is subsequently recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I will now invite Francis Wagstaff to come and speak to the committee. When you press the red button, 3 minutes will begin. Thank you. Yeah, can you press the red button, please? Thank you.
So that'll be 3 minutes then. That's why I'm trying to get away from it. Okay. Good evening. I belong to the CO1 Residents Association. I'm also supporting other local residents in the area. I do hope that you've managed to read my email. If you have, thanks in advance. This application has been back and forth since 2021. What might this suggest to local people? It suggests that the plans have had to be constantly revised and amended in order to satisfy and comply with regulations and guidance, surely a starting point for a development, not significant add-ons as in the provision of disabled parking space. The perceived lack of transparency on many fronts is concerning. For instance, the considerable infestation of knotweed identified in 2011 was not acknowledged in the report, despite JDS only contributing to the first treatment, as it was in their land as well as the folly in the garden of number 51. All residents who have the folly on their deeds, which I have here, all the residents have the folly on their deeds, continue to pay for the whole area to be treated for a further 4 years, as the advisor from Essex County Council said this was the only way to contain the knotweed. I personally supervised the treatment, including some of the back gardens of Albert Street. We have had no acknowledgement or thanks for this. It would have been a very different outcome if we had not done this. According to the report, the top layer of soil was removed in 2018. Was this removed according to the Environmental Protection Act 1991 and disposed of according to Section 34? The contractor certainly wasn't aware and denied all knowledge of previous knotweed infestation. We live here, the developers don't. Despite asserting to the solicitor they have unrestricted use of the folly for 17 years, yet we haven't seen any regular footfall. And in what capacity were they carrying out this unrestricted access via a metal fence and impenetrable brambles? The defined route out to Margaret Road has already been blocked by them, denying us access. The apparent claim of the ownership of the folly has mystified those of us who hold deeds going back to 1930. Was this ownership challenged, and who has verified this? A Certificate A should give ownership to the applicant's land only, not the folly. Transport Statement 2 in the document advises that if unsuccessful, this plot could revert to the builder's yard with attendant safety issues for pedestrians, cyclists and local traffic. How do residents feel with this perceived threat, given the high footfall of families, children and going to the local school or walking to public transport? Residents are not against a development that is realistic for this space. Sadly, we have little confidence in the integrity of this application. We seek a respectful relationship with the applicant, clarification of the use of the folly given its present status and total transparency in all areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I then now move on to the visiting councillors, and I ask Councillor Gocher to come and speak to the committee members. And your time will begin when you press the red button, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I want to raise the issue of the ownership of the folly. First of all, rather than the rights of way, because obviously the two things are distinct. In terms of ownership, I understand that the developer has got a Certificate A to suggest ownership, but I'm advised that that refers to the site rather than the folly. So does Certificate A ownership refer to the folly as well as the site? That's the first question. Secondly, what verification has taken place of any documentation that has been provided? Has that been checked legally? But I suppose the big issue is who owns the folly. Regardless of who has a right of way over it, who owns the folly? Secondly, in terms of the second issue, rights of way, my understanding is that there is documentation from the developer to suggest that the previous owner had rights of way over the folly, and of course there's documentation to suggest that local residents have rights of way over the folly. And is that the issue that is a civil matter rather than a planning matter, rights of way, or does the entire issue of ownership as well form a civil matter rather than a planning consideration? Because the two things are indistinct, and I'm unsure in my own mind what exactly is a civil matter and what is a planning consideration. If the issue of rights of way is a civil matter, and if the right of way is denied to residents, then they have recourse to take legal action. Could officers provide the panel, the committee, with a full explanation of why that is a civil matter and not a planning consideration? That's the issue of the folly. In terms of the development as a whole, could officers please explain any implications for the Margaret Road entrance to the site? And again, address the issues of ownership and rights of way into access into site from Margaret Way, because obviously I know that there's basically a dirt track and then a turning into the site, which is at the moment closed off. Who owns the dirt track? Who has rights of way over the dirt track? And then entering into the site, who has both ownership and rights of way over the entrance into the site from Margaret Road? And there have been concerns raised about the implication for people driving round Margaret Road of people continually accessing that site. So can you explain to the committee and visitors the highway, any highways implications of that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gocher. I now call Councillor Kafoglu to come and speak to the committee. And again, once you press the red button, you will have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. There are several residents over a private, unadopted accessway, which is also known as folly. Several deeds show that this folly not only abuts the western and northern boundaries, but runs north, joining onto Margaret Road, and that the present application does not concede such established rights of way. There is genuine concern that if the committee disregards established rights of way by authorizing the applicant to turn this folly into a pedestrian and cyclist only accessway, it would wholly obstruct and extinguish neighbors' right of way for the future. It must be highlighted that currently those with deeds referring to folly have the right of way for vehicles and pedestrian access too. The committee should be conscious and cautious about the fact that if a resident with an existing right-of-way for both vehicles and pedestrians wants to turn a certain section of their back garden into a garage based on the existing right-of-way, a decision taken tonight to allow the applicant to turn the folly into a pedestrian and cycle-only accessway will in effect eliminate residents' right to have vehicular access to their back gardens. Although there were claims that right-of-way is not a primary consideration matter for the committee, during last month's committee meeting, members of this committee expressed their concerns and reservations about approving an application that may then lead to a legal dispute. We have residents who have made inquiries with their solicitors to get clarification over ownership and rights surrounding the folly. I believe an informed decision and consideration demands us to listen to all parties and encourage cooperation and collaboration between applicants and residents. Although the committee cannot impose such condition, I believe we can encourage parties to communicate and work together. Following meetings that some of the residents had with their solicitors, they were informed that the land associated with this application has no right of access over the folly leading to Colchester Road, and there were also two older plans where the latest one mentioned a limited right to a small part of the folly. I was informed that the residents' legal team also reviewed other related registered titles, and none of them mentioned rights of way over the folly. It should be noted that residents with relevant deeds have the right of way through the folly all the way up to Margaret Road, despite the fact that folly has been blocked by the former developer. Considering that on the one hand, we have an applicant who is planning to alter the structure, usage and accessibility of folly into a refuse collection and bicycle parking rack, and on the other hand, we have residents and their legal team challenging applicants' claim over ownership and rights surrounding folly, I believe for the peace of mind of my colleagues in the committee, it will be beneficial to properly read and analyze reports and documents submitted by both residents and applicants' legal representatives. I believe that is the only way to ensure that a decision made and taken tonight won't be interpreted as aiding and abetting to a legal dispute. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, I now invite Daniel and Simon to address the points that have been raised.
Thank you, Chair. First point in terms of previous applications that have the history of the site, obviously they were beyond what is being considered this evening. The history of the site, as I've outlined previously in the presentation, was there was a refusal in 2022 simply on grounds of highway safety. The applicant then provided an updated highway plan with improved accessibility to the site, including resurfacing the section of Margaret Road, which is an unadopted road, at their own expense, to ensure that the access arrangements would actually be enhanced as part of this application. So in terms of the other issue, in terms of knotweed, there is evidence of knotweed being on site previously, and as alluded to by the speaker, that was dealt with within 2018 with the clearance of the site, and it has been confirmed in subsequent reports that there is no longer the presence on site, and that has been confirmed by the specialist involved in that. The access to Corston Road is currently overgrown, especially to the south of the site, and the development, I would argue, is actually representing an enhancement to the south of this currently unused section of ground. It is true that there's currently unable to access Margaret Road from the south of the Corston entrance, by a combination of the overgrown nature of the edge of the site and also the gate to the north, as mentioned. Unfortunately, with this, as I outlined before, the rights of access are unfortunately a civil matter which can't be determined under this planning application because, and I'll cover that in the next section. So certificate A, which has been signed by the applicant, refers to the land within the red line boundary. It is noted that the ownership of the folly queries that have been provided by local residents, that there is evidence on their deeds that they do have this right of way across the site, which indeed would not be possible post-development. But yeah, unfortunately, that is a civil matter that would need to be dealt with through legal means. Margaret Road, the developer would improve the existing surface on Margaret Road at their own expense, as we've already covered. And just to clarify, the access to the south towards Corston Road is for the provision, is for the 4 dwellings to the south to four dwellings to the south to allow access via their bins and their cycle parking. It is not in any way, would not in any way mean that there's only cycle and bin use of that folly. Any rights towards vehicle access would still remain in place, and owing to the nature of the boundary, it would actually not be prevented as part of this application. Vehicle access would still be possible to get to those dwellings to the east of the site, as mentioned by the speaker. And other issues such as subsequent planning applications coming in for dwellings to the east, if they did want a garage to the rear of their properties, obviously we would have to deal with that as is. Obviously we're only determining this evening this application on its current merits, and it would be wrong to penalise an applicant on something that's hypothetical in this instance, but I'd just like to reiterate vehicle access is still possible post-development. All comments, unfortunately there were some comments made post the issuing of the update sheet. They have been summarised on the update sheet, and I've obviously referenced them in my presentation as well. They have all been considered in depth, and based on the evidence that's been supplied, it appears that they simply have a civil right of access to the north of the site, as I've already covered. And I'd just like to clarify as well, the folly would not house the refuse storage for the dwellings to the south. It would literally be used as an access route for the bins to go towards Corston Road, which would then be arranged for curb collection as a normal dwelling on Corston Road. And I believe that's covered most of the points. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask?
Yeah, can you just wait for me to introduce you? Simon, you'd like to come back, thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, yes. I just asked Dan to clarify for the purposes of the committee that all the land that is within the red-lined boundary and is covered by Certificate A is in fact evidenced to be in the ownership of the applicant. Is that correct, Dan?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and just to cover Councillor Kafoglu's point, or was it Councillor Colchester, that's been legally checked?
Yes, it hasn't been legally checked. Obviously, when the onus is on the applicant to supply the correct certificate for the land that within their ownership. All evidence that they've supplied suggests that they do have ownership of that. Essentially, the site used to be rear gardens of the properties to the west, which was purchased and obviously now comprises of the entire site. So basic and the deeds that have been referenced for neighbouring dwellings have only explicitly said that there is a right of access, not a right of ownership over that folly. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so just to help me out, could you put page 95 up of the agenda and to look at the map? So we're just taking a moment to allow Daniel to put that up on the screen. That will do, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm having to look over Carl's head, but basically there's an L-shaped access. Is that part of the access to the back gardens?
Are you referring to the section just within the red line area, that L-shaped?
Just outside the red line, it goes off to the right, and there was talk about people needing access to the rear gardens. Is that what is being referred to?
Yes. Yes, essentially the area highlighted here in blue, that is the folly that leads to Colchester Road. Apologies if let me just hide that little box, which isn't very helpful. Yes, so that's the area that leads to Colchester Road to the south. And whilst it's just worth pointing out at this stage, whilst the red line does go slightly over into that blue section, that is in no means a hard boundary. So that's not a fence going along there. The fence would terminate where that grey section is to the south of the gardens, just to clarify that point.
Thank you. So there is no physical building that goes over top of that access. And I heard talk about there being access right through the site. And looking at that map, it looks like something goes right up to the boundary. So would that preclude through access?
Yes, essentially the deeds suggest that the folly here to the south of the blue section would continue up where my cursor is here, leading up to the front of the site at Margaret Road. Obviously, this is where the issues with a civil matter of right of access come in. Obviously, with those buildings being constructed there, obviously that would prevent access to the north, which would need to be resolved.
Yeah, thank you, but that would be a civil matter. We're looking at a plan as put in front of us. So just to clarify for me, what's the grey L shape on the end of the disabled parking space?
That is an area of that disabled spaces are required to have to comply with adopted standards. So it's basically to allow an open door away from the fence so that you've got a bit extra manoeuvrability getting in and out of the vehicles.
Right, so even if there was cars parked in a line, there would be pedestrian access because of that space?
There wouldn't be pedestrian access because essentially to the south, the dwelling to the right-hand side, that would be their garden. So, and the area in between that rear garden and the disabled space would be in planting that's part of the planting scheme on site.
Okay, thank you. Right, we will move to debate, and I have Councillor Powling wishing to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I think you beat me to my own thunder. I was going to ask exactly where the folly was and the access, because I weren't quite familiar with it, but you've highlighted that. The only other question possibly on this, does the local community there get any 106 or any benefit out of this development at all?
Okay, let me just take a question from Councillor Lissimore before I ask you to come back, Daniel.
Thank you. Whilst I understand that the access is a civil issue and it's not something that we can cover in planning, what are the powers that we have within planning to say that we do not, by cutting off this access, we do not believe that we are aiding pedestrian use of the area, or perhaps even cycle use of the area? I don't want to say cycle use, because obviously if cycle use was included, it would have to be of a certain width. If it's pedestrian use, it would have to be a certain width, but I presume if it was cycle use, it would have to be wider than a pedestrian. What powers do we have as a planning committee to say we do not believe that this is enhancing the pedestrian use of the area, and therefore we wish that the pedestrian access is kept, and we therefore refuse this until they come back with a plan that has the full pedestrian access across the whole north to south of the site?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lissimore. I've got nobody else indicating they wish to speak, so Councillor McLean, please. Thank you.
Just for clarity regarding the access points, and there could be legal matters involved, I think we need to get clarity on the legal side of it, because we could be instructing something that will then backfire on the residents, because I think we need to get the legal side sorted out first of all to make sure that it's all watertight what we would be approving if we approved it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McLean. So we have a question from Councillor Powling, which is around 106 contributions, and questions from Councillor Lissimore and Councillor McLean around the legal side of passing something that would impinge upon established access rights. Can you please respond? And I understand Simon also wishes to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of the first point, there is a unilateral undertaking through the 106, section 106 essentially, which would require £18,000 for the community team, which would contribute towards the redevelopment of St Peter's Church and Church Hall. And in addition, for open space, sport and recreation, there would be a contribution of £41,000.
And on the second point?
Yes, the second point regarding pedestrian access, the current, just to clarify, the current situation is that there is no access at all, based on the fact that the site is entirely enclosed by brambles and some fencing that has been erected by the owner of the site. So in a way, this development would actually enhance the cycle provision, if not from the north, actually for the dwellings that are proposed to the south. In terms of provision of increasing cycle proficiency in the area, obviously, as the folly is outside of the control of the applicant, limited enhancements could be agreed to, sort of in terms of like resurfacing the area, clearing the space, because as we've highlighted, it is a communal area currently. But obviously, in terms of a planning matter, we wouldn't be able to refuse a planning scheme based on the fact that there is no pedestrians or cycle access towards Margaret Road. And the final point. Sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to really expand upon the point that Daniel has made. The purpose of planning is to mediate the use of land in the wider public interest. Here you are dealing with solely private property interests. In a way, you're familiar in other instances where there have been other legal devices to the benefit of private individuals. This is no different to those situations, insofar as there is no indication that a public right-of-way has ever existed through the site north-south. And I think if such a right did exist, that would be a wider public interest. But in effect, the alleged or the evidenced private rights-of-way are exactly that, and something which, if they are set out within those people's registered title, they will be able to exercise those rights and potentially preclude the development going ahead. You are entitled to grant permission for development that may not be technically deliverable due to private rights or property interests. That is a matter between those individuals and the developer, and not something which forms a material planning consideration, given that there is no indication of a public right-of-way through the site.
Thank you, Simon. So the recommendation is for approval. Are there any proposals from members of the committee? Does anyone wish to propose approval? I'm hearing silence. Does anyone wish to propose anything other than approval? Okay, then I will have to step forward as chair and say that I would like to propose approval of the scheme as set out within the officer's report. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tate seconds. Could I ask all those in favour?
Eight.
Anyone against? Any abstentions?
One.
So that application is approved, and thank you for anyone who has attended. You're free to leave now, and also this is the opportune moment for Councillor Gocher and Councillor Lilly to come back into the room. Thank you.
I'll go and get Councillor.
Right, thank you, members. And now Councillor Gocher and Councillor Lilly are in the room. I will point out that Councillor Gocher is continuing to recuse himself on this item, but does not wish to speak. So therefore, could I invite James Ryan to present the report to the committee?
Thank you, Chairman. Having problems sharing, I'll be with you in a minute. Good evening, members. Sorry about the slight delay. So, fairly simple one for you, hopefully. 4 signs at Trinity Square on the railings. I'll just whiz through them. I know we've got a public speaker. There's a site plan showing the Holy Trinity Church. I'm sure all well aware of that in the town centre. The slightly larger block plan showing the 4 dots where the proposed signs are intended to go. They're temporary signs. It's here before you tonight because it's a council application. That's what the sign's going to look like. Just demonstrating that, funded by the UK government, we are creating, or the council are creating, an outdoor space for the community as per previous applications have been to members. So 4 of those, A1 in size. So there's a kind of CAD mock-up of what it'll look like. There's a western side image of the church. That's western southern side looking up towards the church. Southern side, eastern side, more of the eastern side, view from the library, and the northern side. So let's go back to the, so very simple, 4 of them, they're going to look like that. Any questions? Thanks very much.
Thank you. Right, I'll invite Melinda Svantidaki to come and speak to the committee. You have 3 minutes once you press the red button. Thank you.
Looking at the agenda of today's meeting, I understand that it would be about a request to place 4 notice boards informing the public about construction work undertaken by the council in an effort to make Colchester a better place, all in Trinity Square. So my question today is, why 4? I have a feeling that this excessive invasion is going to affect the character of this historic environment in a disturbing way. Trinity Square is where the oldest building of Colchester, the Holy Trinity Church, is situated. Respecting the heritage in this case means preservation of the building and its environment as much as possible. I would therefore suggest that the council abandons plans that over-invade either inside the building or its surroundings. In the case that the Friends of St. Martin's Incorporated Association that I represent bid is successful, we would like to keep the building and its surroundings in good order, but as near to their original image as possible and as prescribed by archaeological principles. I would like also to take this opportunity to comment on the fact that the panel choosing the best bid for the actual building of the Holy Trinity has set as criteria of their choice that the best bidder would be the most financially advantageous for the council. This criteria is not appropriate for a building originally built as a church. The Holy Trinity was originally as a house built as a house of God. The lease, therefore, belongs to Him. He is letting it to the council, and in the Bible he said not to make his house a house of business. The Friends of St. Martin's is primarily respects this by proposing that the right wing of the building is preserved as a temple, a common place of prayer for all local Christians. I would advise the council to welcome the will of Christians which we represent if they want to avoid the fate of another politician in America recently. I believe also that all council decisions about the castle ward ought to take into account the opinion of the councillors of the Green Party, because as I said in a previous cabinet meeting, it is them who, as per the election result, represent the will of the Colchester community for this ward. And from my own research, the will of the community is that the Holy Trinity remains a place of worship, as well as becoming a community space offering vital services to the most disadvantaged and vulnerable, some of which are currently lacking. Caring for people's daily bread will not be financially beneficial for the council. Nevertheless, it is its obligation to cater for this need. To reiterate, Colchester is not such a big place for the council to worry that the work will not get known. People get to know what is going on from the media.
Thank you very much. could you turn your mic off? Thank you. And I invite James to address the points made and their relevance to the application that we are discussing.
Thank you very much, Chair. As an application for advert consent, the only matters for consideration are visual amenity or amenity and public safety. The majority of, as you can see in the report, officers consider that this scheme is acceptable in terms of its impact on amenity, 4 signs being 1 per set of railings in effect, and therefore entirely reasonable. It raises no concerns in terms of public safety either, being non-illuminated and relatively small signs. I think the rest of what was said related to the bidding process for the building itself and is not therefore relevant to the advert application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. We have no speakers in support and no visiting councillors to speak, so I'll open it up for debate and I will invite Councillor Lissimore first.
Thank you. This is a very small issue, but I noticed there's a QR code on the sign and there is a website link. But is it possible to have a phone number perhaps? I know we don't want people to ring in because it costs us as the council more when people ring in. However, I'm thinking about making this the explanation of what's happening here accessible to everybody, and not everybody has access or knows how to use a QR code and knows how to decipher to go into the website to look at the information. So it's a very small point, but I just wondered if we can add a phone number on it as well.
Thank you. And Councillor Powling.
Yes, basically this is for small advertising boards, or to demonstrate what the government proposal is for the renovation bits of the building, I believe. I'd happy to propose that we accept these boards. I don't know if it's possible to put a small thing on there that if they were to be graffitied or anything, that they get replaced quickly so they don't look a mess. So in other words, they're always going to look very smart. So with that, but other than that, I'd happy to propose it with that sort of, and the same as the phone number. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Powling. And Councillor Young.
Happy to accept the proposal and we move to vote, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, what we're going to do, Councillor Young, we're just going to give James the opportunity just to respond, and then we'll go to the vote. Thank you.
With regards to the maintenance and the keeping clean and tidy and the maintenance if graffiti occurs, certainly we can put that on as an informative to the community, to the comms team, to make sure that occurs. It's not something we could condition because it's very difficult to enforce, but as these are our adverts effectively, I'm sure we can ask them to do that. With regards to a phone number, we can certainly ask. I don't think it wouldn't be reasonable to condition it as an advert consent application because we're not really looking at the content of the advert itself. But again, as an informative, we can strongly request that they put a phone number on there, and it'll be down to them as to whether they do or don't.
Okay, so Councillor Powling, you happy with an informative?
I am, Chair.
Thank you. Right, let's go to the vote. Those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous, Chair.
I won't ask for extensions or against because it's obvious. Thank you for the people that turned up for that. And we now move on to item 7.3, which, oh, sorry, I'm told that was 7.3, so we move on to item 8.
So that's the report from James.
And that is a report from James. So James, over to you.
Thank you very much again, Chair and members. This is a request to the Planning Committee for a change to the scheme of planning delegation. So that's the way we delegate decisions to officers for a new thing, a mechanism. This is something that is all new to the planning system and something I've been leading on with in the planning team for the creation of habitat banks. For biodiversity net gain purposes. Now, a habitat bank is where a piece of land, a landowner, for example, a farmer, wants to designate a piece of land for biodiversity net gain purposes so they can improve the land from its habitat baseline to an excellent level of biodiversity over a 30-year period, so they can sell the units on the open market. So the land will have value because they can sell these units, and in return the land is significantly increased through a detailed management plan which will be monitored throughout the course of those 30 years. It's extremely unusual, if not unique, in that landowners will be asking us to obligate them via a Section 106 agreement where there is no planning application, because they don't require planning usually, so there's no planning application to determine here. It's simply an agreement that the landowner will sign a bilateral undertaking through Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act, so they can then go to Natural England to say, look, we have a legal agreement in place, you can put us on the register, can we please sell our units? The benefit to the council is that we then get the uplift in our area, and when developers need to use off-site units for their development, they will be able to use units that are in our area as opposed to another area. So it's a good news story, I think. It's the current scheme of delegation doesn't mention it because it's all new. So I've been dealing with a couple in their early iterations, and it dawned on me that we don't have delegated power to deal with them. Hence why this report is before you. So any questions, I'll be delighted to answer.
Okay, thank you, James. So open to debate. Any member wishes to put any views? I have Councillor Powling.
Yeah, the only thing to get this right, the biodiversity banks, is that when a developer is developing a site and there's not enough room to put biodiversity on it, he would then go to a farmer or a landowner and then buy units on that over a time of 30 to 35 years to offset that development. So I assume the expense to developer would then be paying the landowner over that time, and it would come under the expense of the developer to do that over that period.
Yep, James, if you'd like to answer.
Yes, in essence, that's correct. They will actually buy biodiversity units as a marketplace for units. So they're bought like one might buy another asset. So they pay at the time. They say that they're going to off-site some. They may have some on-site and some off-site. They might not be able to reach their statutory 10% gain on-site. So they'll put what they can on-site, and the rest they will have to off-site, and they'll buy the units in one go. They don't make a payment throughout. They make the payment via the marketplace to the landowner at the start, in effect, and then the landowner is obliged to deliver the on-site uplift, and it will be our responsibility to monitor that agreement to ensure that they actually do it. And they have to send us monitoring reports, which I will then send to our consultant ecologists to make sure they're happy with them, and then we'll have enforcement powers if they decide if they don't end up following through. So that's what the legal agreement is there for. It's to give us the enforcement clout, effectively, to make sure that the units are actually delivered.
Okay, Councillor Gocher.
Thank you, Chair. I'm probably missing something here, but how is this whole thing going to be policed? Because, in thinking in terms of possible corruption, say for sake of argument, a developer can't biodiversify a particular site they want to build on, so they want to purchase one of these off-site units. What's to stop them buying one from their mate in Scotland, and the mate in Scotland not necessarily doing the biodiversity work on their field? Who's making sure they've done that? How is it policed, and how would we in Colchester know that this land in Scotland has been biodiversified that belongs to the farmer that is a friend of the developer? Thanks.
And Councillor Tate.
Yes, it might just be I've missed something because it's been a long evening, but I just wanted to clarify. So say I am the person who's got this lovely field which has got lots of biodiversity on it. In saying yes that you can have some units of my field, is that effectively saying that for that 30 years it's not open to development? In essence it's protecting sites as well against development. Excellent.
I've got no other indicators speaking to Jane. Sorry, Carl, I'll just let James answer those points and then come back to you. James.
Firstly, Councillor Goetz made a very, very good point. The whole idea of the legal agreement is that then the local planning authority, i.e. us, would have the legal clout to ensure that they do the biodiversity uplift that is set out in something called the Habitat Monitoring and Management Plan, which will submit with the BNG, their original baseline, when they make the application to us. And they need to, and we will chase them, they need to send monitoring reports in on a 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 and 30 year basis to demonstrate to us that they are doing that. And it's literally a form, it's got photos in it, it needs to be carried out by a competent ecologist, and then we will get that cross-reference with our own consultant ecologist to check they're absolutely happy. Obviously, we'll have a log of all these, and they'll all be in our area, so we will go and visit just to double check that nothing untoward has gone, because it is clearly a concern that you could start selling units and just not do it. But as obviously we don't have any control of what happens in Scotland or the north, but it will only be in our district that we are responsible for. But it shouldn't be, hopefully, too onerous. And there is a fee, because we have a fee structure that will be going to the fees and charges. We're going to cabinet in the new fees and charges for 2025, where applicants will pay for the legal agreement, they'll pay for the fees for the legal agreement, and they'll pay us to monitor their agreement throughout the 30-year period. With regards to council estates, absolutely, it will protect, they will be obliged to fulfill their requirements of the Section 106 agreement, and it will protect land for the next 30 years, absolutely. So in that respect, it's also another benefit.
Councillor Parling.
It was a good point made by Councillor Groucho. The only other thing is what happens, you know, after 30 years or 35 years, it seems a way of just passing the and it gives the developer 30 years to mostly go and then start building on it. It'd be interesting to see why only 30 years. Maybe if it's biodiversity, if we're talking about trees and oak trees that could be put on it, they take a lot long, they can be there for hundreds of years, not 30. And is the full cost of this biodiversity, like the setting out of the land net, borne by the developer, or is the landowner expected to do that? Because then is it actually going to be fully cost effective for them if they suddenly have to start bearing costs? And it's not fair really on Colchester. Like you say, we're going to possibly need additional resources then for these ecology reports each time, which has been mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. So, James, is 30 years long enough? And who foots the full costs?
30 years is what the government requires us to sign up to. I think it stems from the fact that the majority of landowners are likely to be farmers, and they are unlikely to want to obligate their land in perpetuity for reasons of potential inheritance, tax matters, that kind of thing. I think the idea is that once it's gone for 30 years, it's likely to be an extremely rich habitat that would therefore protect itself to a certain extent from development. If you've got semi-mature woodlands, improved grasslands, this kind of thing, the idea would then be that it's to a certain extent protected by the planning process because it's a rich habitat, and we would always seek through the biodiversity net gain register, and because we're now biodiversity net is a statutory requirement, it'd be very difficult to develop that site because you'd never get the baseline above. If you've got an extremely biodiverse piece of land, then to cut it all down and put houses on it, your baseline would drop so low you'd never be able to get back up to the baseline, let alone a 10% on top of that. So it effectively protects itself is the idea. Yes, it will be us that will bear the costs of enforcement, but ultimately we will be charging the landowner for the monitoring costs of the cost that it will take to get their report assessed by a consultant, an administration charge so we don't rack up bills in terms of chasing them for monitoring reports and the admin that takes. So we intend to be entirely cost neutral on this. It will be entirely in the landowner's cost to create the biodiversity uplift, the work that takes, the planting that takes, not the developers. The developer will simply buy the units and that will be their job done. The landowner will then be obliged to create the uplift in line with their plan for the 30 years.
Okay, a couple of questions from my point of view. What strikes me is that if, say this scheme isn't in place and someone puts forward a planning application, then we would be looking to see whether they could enhance the biodiversity by at least 10%. And if they couldn't, then that would have an impact on whether the proposal was acceptable. But in this instance, they'll simply go off to a biodiversity bank and purchase that land to make it acceptable. But if the biodiversity gain would have been on the site, you can pretty much say that's going to be a permanent thing. But what you're talking about could not be permanent after 30 years. So there's that difference there about over the longer term, what do you gain by giving up your power to ensure the biodiversity on site by allowing effective off-site compensation? And the other question is, these costs, are we asking them to be paid up front rather than be paid in arrears? Because if it's in arrears, you then got more costs chasing the arrears. If it's up front, there's an incentive because they have to put the money up front.
Why habitat banks are potentially so powerful in biodiversity terms is because they can allow strategic sized sites to come forward for the benefit of biodiversity that are not necessarily all that publicly accessible and therefore don't suffer from recreational disturbance. The problem with on-site biodiversity, as we will find as we deliver more and more B&G on-site, is that invariably it's right next to where people live and it can be easily trampled, it's intensively used, and it's less likely, potentially, to flourish into a large strategic network of extremely improved biodiversity habitat. This links in with the local nature recovery scheme, which is currently just past its consultation period that Essex are running on. You get slightly more credits if you do your biodiversity net gain in a local nature recovery area. So that means that it's one of the key potential levers we have to make, well, incentivize landowners to uplift biodiversity as opposed to, you know, intensively farm their land. So ultimately, it'd be 30 years if it's on a piece of public open space. It'd be 30 years if it's in a habitat bank. But the likelihood is it will suffer far less trampling and intensive use on a suburban housing estate, for example, than on a habitat bank. In practice, you'll probably get both. Developers want to do as much as they can on site because it's free, in effect, but they will probably need to buy some units as well, and that might be a happy medium. In terms of the fees and charges, our current suggestion is that we, because 30 years is a very, very long time, different councils are doing it differently. We've chosen to suggest an upfront fee for the Section 106, so they'll cover our legal costs anyway, an upfront fee for the assessment of the biodiversity net gain plan, and then we will invoice them at each monitoring. I mean, the legal duty to send in the monitoring reports, but we're going to have to chase it anyway because we always do, so we'll invoice them at that time, and we can then index link or increase our fees and charges regime on the yearly basis like we normally do to ensure that we are covering the real costs, including the costs of our consultant ecologists who happen to be place services. I think that way gives us better control over a 30-year period, so we don't end up taking a lump sum now and then finding that it doesn't anywhere near cover the potential enforcement risk of 30 years of enforcing. We don't really know how popular this is going to be. You know, having ad hoc discussions with landowners, it seems like a lot of people are getting very interested, but there's not that many people that have taken the plunge because obviously 30 years is a long-term commitment and will take some of their land out of agricultural production if it's currently in agricultural production. So there are a couple of, we've got one with the Essex Wildlife Trust at Abbots Hall Farm, which is potentially coming forward, and one with Essex County Council themselves, and then some other potential landowners are in contact. So it's very early stages, and it's difficult to know how exactly it's going to play out because it's in early stages, but we think it is something that is certainly worthwhile doing in the district because, or in the city council administrative area, because if we don't have them here, they will invariably have to go to Braintree or Tendring or other places.
Thank you. Yeah. Just before I ask Robert to come in, and Carl has indicated, I'd just like you to clarify one other point for me. If could effectively give up our power to insist on-site biodiversity increase, which from what I've understood you've said, that is often related to public open space. The worry for me is that it's a way of leading to greater intensification of a site because you give up the public open space biodiversity gain to go off-site, and therefore you leave space for greater intensification of whatever is proposed to be built there, even though that might lead to a greater offset. But physically, what you may be seeing is more densification and less open space, and that is a concern to me.
Respond to that. I mean, we still have our local plan policy of 10% on-site open space, so it should not, and it is not intended to, quite the opposite. It's not intended to allow the densification. It is to facilitate biodiversity net gain because the government has realised it's actually very difficult to deliver when you go from a baseline of 5, for example, 5 units. If you put houses on it or anything on it, it's going to drop down first before you can go up to the 10% above your 5. So it's actually very difficult to deliver it on site unless you've got a large allocation. So that doesn't mean that you'll be getting allocations that are far denser because we still have our requirement for the sustainable urban drainage systems, for example, and for the 10% on-site open space for leisure and amenity value. Some developers will try and fit some on-site B&G in around that as well, but some will have to go off-site. The problem is if we decide that we don't want to do it, it doesn't mean that developers have to put their B&G on site because there's an open marketplace where they can go and buy it from other authorities who will do it. And there's a statutory. They're very expensive, but there are statutory credits you can buy from government, because if there's no credits available in your area and you need to do your biodiversity net gain, there's effectively a pressure release valve that government run, where you can buy a unit for around £40,000 a unit. So very expensive, intentionally expensive to get people to avoid using it, but some people will have to if habitat banks don't come forward, for example. So it seems like a sensible idea, I would argue.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Parling.
Just one thing, Chair, I'm happy to propose this, but I have one quick question on which hopefully James will answer is, if a farmer, for example, is the one who's got to maintain this over this 30 years, how are the finances to that farmer set? Is it going to be a set fee or will it be a negotiation? Because cost depends how he does it. It could run up and we don't suddenly in 10, 15 years time the farmer goes, I can't afford this. So if there's a question like that, other than that, I'd be happy to propose this bank, Chair.
Okay, James, you want to respond?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In practice, there's a marketplace for biodiversity units, so a landowner will attempt to get as much as they can for their unit, depending on the distinctiveness of the units that they can provide on site. They will obviously price them below the statutory figure, because otherwise you'd probably just go for statutory, but that this will rise and fall on the basis of the market like any other marketplace, and it is absolutely an obligation, hence why we would have a legal agreement. They cannot enter this agreement on the basis that they'll just decide not to deliver it, because they have an obligation to do so, and we would ultimately have to enforce against them in the courts if they decided that they didn't, and the 106 agreement would have facility to do that. So it's not something that any landowner should take on lightly, absolutely not, and we'll be advising that throughout the process. But the value of the land above agricultural values could be significantly higher, so there is a financial benefit to them potentially.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other people wishing to speak, so Councillor Powling, would you like to tell us what your proposal is?
I'm happy to propose we accept the officer's proposal for this land bank.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Young. Robert wishes to come in.
Sorry, just to be very clear, the recommended decisions of the committee are only asked to change the scheme of delegation. We're not actually here to discuss the policy at range. What I'd suggest, if members are interested, and there is a lot of mileage, by the sound of it, the members do want to possibly discuss further, that should be brought up and scrutinised at different panels. Should members wish to take it possibly to scrutiny or other ones, or the local panel, which it might have gone to before, or with the biodiversity SPD possibly in that. But I'd say there's different vehicles, but we're just looking at solely the change to the scheme and delegation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, is that clear? And you're happy with that, Councillor Parling?
I'm happy with that, Chair.
Okay, and you're still happy to second that, Councillor Young? Okay, all those in favour?
That is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. I won't ask for abstentions or those against. Can I thank you all for your time? At just gone 8:45, that concludes the meeting. Thank you.